Hello and welcome back everyone to another pre-recorded lesson video. This is another week. Progress report grades are finalized and they should be going out sometime this week. I think the grades so far are good. Some of you will have a failing grade for the first progress report because you just haven't done the major test yet. The test is still open. It's labeled 3-week test. It is labeled as a major grade. So please go and get that done so I can update the grade book for you. But other than that, I think that's the only big announcement before we get started. As you can see, we're starting off with a massive painting here. So I want y'all to just quickly observe this painting. Y'all have done this before. See what you notice, like what you see first, and then what you wonder, right? Like what questions you have about this painting, because it's sort of a weird painting, right? I had a lot of questions when I first saw this painting, okay? So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to do that. Pause this video if you need to. But again, we're just going to move on because, virtual as a pre-record lesson video, it's sort of hard to get your input unless you're emailing me or messaging me on Schoology, which a couple of you do, and I really do appreciate that. But some of the stuff I noticed and that I wondered is I noticed this right here is apparently a cake. So I noticed that there's a cake on the table and she's holding flowers, so it sort of looks like a celebration, right? I noticed that her eyes are open while his are closed while they're kissing. I also noticed, the wavy lines, right? His body is sort of messed up, right? People's necks aren't supposed to bend that way or their backs. So I realized that they're floating on air, essentially. I noticed that there's food on the table and there's a bed right here and a small window. So I sort of just guessed that it's a pretty small place, right? Small apartment, but that they look happy, right? Some of the questions I had were, why are their bodies like this? What are they celebrating, right, with the flowers and the cake? Maybe it's a birthday, who knows? Maybe it's an anniversary, right? But just some of the things that I noticed, okay? So some of the background information of this painting is titled Birthday. So they are celebrating a birthday. It is painted by Marc Chagall in 1915. So a while ago, but not as old as the last painting we saw, right? Because that one was painted in like the 1500s. Right, so it's a little bit recent. And in that painting, they're celebrating a birthday. They're in love. It doesn't look like they have a whole lot, right? It's a small place, but they look happy, right? And, they look satisfied with what they have, especially since they have each other, right? So I thought the artist was trying to make an analogy, comparing birthday to love. An analogy is basically comparing two things. So it's like a metaphor and a simile, but an analogy is used to show that two things have a lot of similar qualities, that they're very similar in what they are. So while a metaphor and a simile is showed to compare two things, an analogy is used to compare but show that they are very alike in a lot of ways. So a metaphor and a simile are sort of used for artistic purposes, being more descriptive. An analogy is used to show that two things have a lot of similar qualities. So they're basically saying a birthday and love are very similar. And I got to that because you celebrate birthdays, right? Birthdays are a big deal to a lot of people, and they celebrate it. And I said, love is like a celebration, right? You celebrate love whenever people are in love or you're in love. So love is like a celebration, like a birthday, right? It's worth celebrating. So we're going to go over analogy again later on in this lesson. I sort of wanted to introduce it. Analogy is an example of a figurative language. So that's another one, another figurative language that I've introduced to y'all. Hopefully you're keeping up with all the ones I have introduced so far. But we're going to move on to lesson 13. The focusing question for lesson 13 is still what defines the experience of love, right? And the content framing question for lesson 13 is what's happening in the brain. Romantic love is basically an addiction. So we're taking a little break from the play that we're reading, A Midsummer Night's Dream, and we're focusing on this article, In the Brain, Romantic Love is Basically an Addiction. And this article is basically about how romantic love, like a relationship, is basically like an addiction, and people go through the same qualities and characteristics and experiences whenever they're addicted to something and when they're in love, especially in the brain, right? It operates the same way. They have the same symptoms. They go through withdrawal, everything like that, okay? So the learning goal is we're going to be able to identify Helen Fisher's claim in the brain, romantic love is basically an addiction. Claim is another word for like her thesis statement, right? What is she arguing for? What point is she trying to make? And there is going to be a discussion post in on the course homepage as a new assignment. So look out for that, okay? So before we get into this, I want to go over what formal style is. Formal style is a type of language that you use in the classroom setting or in a professional setting or in the workplace, anything like that. It's sort of like academic, but a formal style is what you're going to be seeing in this article and what you're going to be using in your essay at the end. Formal style is what you're going to be using in a lot of essays in the time that you're in school, okay? So an easy way for us to understand what someone is saying whenever they're talking formally is to translate the formal style into a very academic or into a very informal conversational tone, like how we talk every single day. So if the sentence is evidence does not support these notions, just try to translate that into how we talk informally and casually, maybe with friends, with each other, stuff like that, right? So how you would translate this is you can't make me believe that. There's no proof. I don't believe this silly idea because there's actually no evidence, right? So it goes from evidence does not support these notions to you can't make me believe that. There's no proof, right? It makes it a lot easier for us to understand it. It's basically like the play whenever I get those handouts for y'all every single day. It is whenever it's the original Shakespeare and then the modern one. Just trying to translate it into your own words makes it a lot easier to comprehend in the future, right? So why might formal style be a more effective choice than informal style when writing an argument essay? And an argument essay is what you're going to be writing at the end of the module. So why might formal style be more useful, more effective than informal style? So formal style is more serious than informal style, right? So it might be more convincing to a larger audience of readers. Formal style seems more appropriate for the subject matter than informal style. It might be more effective to use formal style when writing an argument about something more important. And formal style shows how much an author knows about their subject. Informal style uses less precise vocabulary and less academic vocabulary, so it doesn't seem as well informed, right? So the whole point of formal style in an argument essay is to make it seem like you actually know what you're talking about, right? In an argument, the main point is to convince the other person that you're right, okay? And if you can't be taken seriously, or it seems like you don't know the subject matter, you're not going to be able to convince them, right? So a formal style makes you seem like you actually know about the subject you're talking about, and it seems more serious, right? So more people are more likely to believe you. If that makes sense. So I want you to all. I know a lot of you won't do this, but for those of you that do, this is really going to help in comprehending what's exactly happening in this article. I want you to go through this article and just look for phrases or sentences that have the word addiction or love in it, maybe together at the same time. And remember, we always have to annotate to help comprehend a text better. Right? So I want you to take the time to do that. And that's going to show another analogy between love and addiction and how they have a lot of similar qualities as well. And that's basically what this article is mainly about. Okay? So take some time to do that. Pause this video if you have to, but we're going to move on. So according to Fisher, what do love and addiction have in common? So if you took the time to read through it, what you're going to see is that the author, Helen Fisher, basically says love and addiction are the same thing, but love is a very positive addiction. So according to Fisher, love and addiction affect people in similar ways. People who are in love show similar behaviors to people who are addicted to other things, like gambling, all the bad things that you think about. And the brain in love is just like the brain when it is addicted, right? So the brain operates the same way as when you're in love with someone and as you're addicted to somebody. So remember, whenever you actually figure out what's happening in the text, you should always be able to summarize it. Whenever you start summarizing a text, you should be able to find the theme. So these are just some of the paragraphs that I summarized personally. So if you want to pause this video and read through some of them, I highly recommend it so you know exactly what's happening in the article. So like an example, I'll read one off. Paragraphs 3 through 5, the summary is brain pathways are activated by more than substance abuse. For instance, gambling is now an official addiction. Romantic love, which evidence shows is a human universal, affects the brain in the same way as substance abuse, but should be considered a positive addiction. They're basically saying romantic love affects the brain the same way as someone on drugs or alcohol or stuff like that, but it is a positive addiction because love is a lot different than those things, right? So if you want, I would pause this video and read through the summaries. I think it would really help out. So pause this video if you want to do that. But again, we're just going to move on. So what is Helen Fisher's claim in this article? What is she trying to argue about? What point is she trying to make? So the claim that she's making in this article is that love is like any other addiction, like gambling, drugs, alcohol, things like that, food. I know a lot of you really love hot chips. You always have to be eating hot chips. He says that love affects the brain the same way as those things, where you constantly need it. Whenever it's gone, you feel terrible, right? But Helen Fisher's claim is that while love is like any other addiction, it's different than those because it is a positive addiction. It's a good addiction. Right? Feeling like you're loved or loving someone is good for you. So that is her claim. That is her thesis statement. And that's going to be a really important thing to remember because the next lesson, we dive into that claim and what evidence Helen Fisher is using to help support that. Because whenever you make a claim or have a thesis statement, you need evidence, you need facts, you need figures to help support that, okay? So that's basically it for this lesson video. I know I went through it quick. What I really want y'all to do is just read that article because it is a really good article. There's a lot of scientific vocabulary, so it does get a little bit hard to understand. But I'm also going to be uploading an assignment as a discussion post. You're going to have to answer whether love is an addiction or not, what you think, and if love is a good or a bad thing for you. So do that. I'm about to upload it right now. Finish the 3-week test if you haven't done so. But other than that, that is it for this lesson video, and I'll see you here for the next one. Bye.